Hello and welcome. This is William Richardson, otherwise known as Will, uh, here, and Nicholas Richardson, cousin Nicky, to us who know him well, ensconced in his library.
My
Warsaw,
study, yes.
Poland. I'm in an undisclosed location. I've moved from Cheyenne, Wyoming. I can tell you where I was. Now, I think I even mentioned it in the last broadcast. Nobody cares.
Yeah, well, you said Wyoming, you didn't say where.
Yeah, nobody cares. But I am in another undisclosed location, somewhere in the vast prairie states, on a mission, rather like the Blues Brothers, a mission from God. uh, that's the way that is. My mission right now is to talk to you, Nicholas, and to go over some headlines. We have some really varied headlines because the world is absolutely mad right now. We've never seen so much change from an American president since FDR in the 1930s, as we're seeing from Donald Trump and his group of game changers. Here comes the rain. We're going to get one of those prairie storms, I think. They've said that there will be possibly tornadoes,
Oh,
cyclones. Remember the Wizard of Oz?
I remember the Wizard of Oz.
Well, I hope where at my location doesn't get whisked off into a cyclone and I end up facing the Wicked Witch surrounded by munchkins.
Indeed.
Yeah, well, you never know. You never know. Stranger things have happened. I can't think of any, but that's pretty strange. Um, if that were the case, which character would you prefer to be? The Tin Man, the Scarecrow, or the Cowardly Lion, or one of the Flying Monkeys? Which character would you be? Assuming I'm Dorothy.
I know, probably the lion.
You like to be the lion? Yeah, he's my favorite too. There's something catchy about that lion. His transformation is amazing. What a dramatic transformation from Cowardly Lion to the Beast of Beasts. Anyway, a lot of things are happening, and I suppose the main thing in world events, although we're going to talk about some regional events too, is the negotiations for ceasefire, to which Ukraine has magically agreed.
Well, I don't think Ukraine had much choice ultimately. That's the point. But in any event, a ceasefire would suit everybody, I suspect. You can only have young men, and it's mainly young men. I accept there are probably women involved as well. But you can only have young men from either side slaughtering each other for so long before somebody has to bring it to a halt.
Somebody has to bring it to a halt. That's right. But do the Russians want to bring it to a halt? Because I just think they'll use delaying tactics as they have always. Putin doesn't know the meaning of the word retreat. He hasn't retreated from any of the areas where he moved, has he?
No.
Except for what's their situation in Syria right now? I'm not clear. It's not what it was, that's for sure.
It's not what it was. I think they've been generally evacuating their hardware and their people. I mean, there've been a couple of ships have steamed from Syria up through the English Channel on their way to the northern Russian ports.
But they still, that's right. I believe you. Yeah, that seems to ring a bell. You follow these things. You used to be a Middle East correspondent.
Yeah. So yes, I mean, we talk about Syria because what has been the main event this week in Syria was the new government, which everybody thought would be jolly good, turning round and massacring large number of Alawites, which are the minority which supported the Assad regime. So it seems that plus ça change, plus ça la même chose. In terms of change in Syria, remains to be seen how much further that's going to go. But he's not the new leader is not the sort of wonderful person everybody was. I don't know what they were expecting. They were kind of fooling themselves into believing it will be a wonderful new regime. But
Well,
it appears not to be that different from the previous one.
Well, yeah, it's going to be oppressive because that's the history in Syria, is and the Middle East, unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
Not
yes.
all of the Middle East, but a lot of it. A lot of it, for sure. And discontent, widespread poverty, and despite the oil riches and so forth. The other places, Georgia, Russia's still there. No signs of retreat. Still have those two provinces in the mountains on the border of Georgia. I was there during that war, of course, reporting from Tbilisi and Gori, and close to that area. I went through the Russian tanks, and a very long line, probably 10 kilometers long, of Russian material, men and material. Didn't look very scary. A lot of it looked like it might not run for very long. They weren't far away from Russia at that point. They haven't left Transnistria, and they threaten Moldavia. At any time, they might move there, and that puts them next to Romania. And of course, they continue to threaten the eastern part of Ukraine, although it seems to be a stalemate, doesn't it?
It does. I think the Russians are creeping. I mean, the Russians did make advances during the week when Trump had turned off the supply of military aid, but more importantly, turned off the supply of intelligence. So not just in the Kursk region, but more significantly further south along the front, the Russians were able to inch forward slightly.
A lot of destruction was brought by the missiles and drones that the Russians fired off, but I understand that the Ukrainians responded with a lot of drone barrages, but most of these things on both sides get shot down.
Well, that's what both sides claim, and they probably do.
Probably do, but I saw a lot of destruction, more than a lot of destruction on the Ukrainian side, as we all did. Pictures, photographs freely available on the internet. Where else have they not moved? What's the main threat? What's the main threat of the Russians? Why will they not do a ceasefire? Let me ask you that. Why will they not do a ceasefire? You're a man who's doing the news every night. You're a professional, and we need a professional opinion right here, right now.
Well, why they won't do a ceasefire immediately? Because they claim, of course, it's typical of the Russians, that they claim that a ceasefire will be used by Ukraine to regroup and re-equip its army. But of course, the Russians will do exactly the same. I think the main problem is that the Russians see their own actions as wholly justified, and that a ceasefire doesn't get them what they want, which is their original grievance, which was obviously manufactured, about the need to make certain changes in Ukraine and to, as they would see it, to defend Russian security, which means no NATO troops anywhere near Ukraine, Ukraine not in NATO, a change of regime in Ukraine, and some restriction on Ukraine's military capability, all of which, of course, is complete nonsense, given that it was Russia that attacked Ukraine in the first place, and there is no evidence that Ukraine posed any threat to Russia. But this is, unfortunately, the paranoia, oblique, sheer chutzpah of Putin and his merry men, in terms of manufacturing a grievance and then taking action to put right this grievance.
If you were Putin, where would you attack next?
Well, I think if I were Putin, I don't, unless he wants to really widen the war and go completely wild and suddenly go into another country, I think he's just got to keep pressing on where he is. It's not a desperately impressive performance by the Russians. The fact they're relying on so many Korean troops is North Korean troops, I should say. The latest interviews I've seen with Ukrainian soldiers suggest, particularly in the Kursk region, that the North Koreans are not as bad as everybody was claiming they were, that they are fearless fighters and they just keep going. Ideal communist sort of party type of soldiers. They just go, and if they get killed along the way, they don't really care too much. So it's not the case that as they were apparently at the beginning, arriving in a completely strange country, not knowing where they were or what they were doing. It seems they are beginning to fight much more effectively.
And are they? The reports are that Ukrainians are encircled in Kursk.
Yes, in the Kursk, and there's some. They never got as far as the city of Kursk, but in the Kursk region, yes, they are. That is the problem. It was particularly during this week that there is one very minor. There's a road to where their main forces are to get back to their own supply lines. The neck of country which they control, which protects this road, was only last time I looked 400 meters wide, which is not very much. And it makes it very difficult for them either to resupply the people on the Kursk front or for the Kursk front to effect an orderly retreat. And it was particularly in this last week when they were short of intelligence as to where the Russian forces were, that the Russians were able to make advances in that particular sector of the front.
Well, they were there was some kind of something about Russian special forces troops crawling through.
They were crawling. Yeah, they were crawling through some gas pipes.
Yeah, and then coming out, popping out, like, you know.
Yeah, but then I think that the Ukrainians eventually put a stop to that. But even so, it's in a very delicate balance in Kursk. And if the Ukrainians lose the 10,000 soldiers in Kursk, they happen to be among their better 10,000 soldiers.
And how are they going to lose? I mean, what's the Ukrainian plan? If you're Ukraine, what's your plan?
Well,
to rescue those that break through that salient.
Well, I don't know what their plan is, but presume their plan is they have to beat an orderly retreat before it's too late, I suspect.
Yeah, because there must be a way still out of there.
There is, but
they can fight their way out. There can't be a really strong ring to the west.
Not quite yet, but they don't have a lot of time to think about it, as I understand.
They need to think about moving out of there, don't they?
Well, they do, really. I mean, they've made their point, and it was quite a good point.
Well, the ceasefire can't take place as long as they're there. I mean, the Russians can be on Ukrainian territory. Ukrainians can't be on Russian territory, right?
Well, that is the Russian. That's the Russian thinking, as always. Yes.
Okay, so I still think the wild card in this negotiation is Trump's personality. I don't think that's an original idea particularly, but it's worth highlighting that he doesn't like to be upstaged.
No.
He doesn't. The one thing he doesn't want is Putin to come out looking better than he does.
Well, yeah, and
whatever you think of Trump's decision making.
Yeah, well,
regarding Ukraine.
Yeah, well, the problem was that that Trump, that is, sort of gave away most of his negotiating tactics to the Russians before he even started.
Which doesn't sound like part of the deal, does it?
No, or it was either some major double bluff, which none of the world's experts have been able to see through yet.
It may be pretend to be weaker than you are, and then smack them.
Yeah. I mean, the issue with the problem with all of this, or not the problem, but the issue is simply this: Ukraine is not, and is unlikely ever to be, in our lifetimes at least, a member of NATO. Therefore, as Russia well knows, there's a limited amount of support which Ukraine can expect from anybody else. The way of stopping Russia would be militarily, but nobody, either the United States nor NATO in the wider sense, has any desire to go to war with Russia. So although Russia is extremely weak financially, demographically, and obviously militarily, there is a limit to how much we can actually do effectively to stop them.
Sanctions. How weak are they? Because I read things and hear things that the Russian economy is doing very well because of their energy. Their gas and oil that they've been able to, natural gas and oil, they've been able to actually find as many markets and sell as much as they were before. They're just not selling it to the West.
Yeah, well, they're selling it to China and India in particular.
Yeah, amongst others, but those are the two. And China doesn't have any of its own.
And it's also getting into the European Union as well. I mean, that's, believe it or not.
It's still some going to the European Union.
It's still some going to the European Union.
Germany.
Well, of
Isn't
course.
Germany the main receiver of their natural gas right now?
I think it is. I think it still is. Yes.
I think the plan in the United States maybe seems a likely plan is with the deregulation of gas and oil production that Europe can be supplied from the United States, which has the greatest resources of anyone.
Well, of course.
Not even counting Alaska. And not to mention, I mean, look at Canada as well. And Mexico has oil too.
Well, exactly. Venezuela has oil. I mean, lots of people have oil.
Well, we don't know whose side Venezuela's on. I suppose the United States is still in charge, more or less, of what's happening in Venezuela. But it's in the backyard.
Yes, I suspect. Sorry, just to finish off.
What's going to happen? What do you predict is going to happen with these negotiations? My prediction is that Putin stalls and pulls out, keeps stalling, eventually pulls out, and is just playing for time.
I think he is. He's already said yes in principle, but there are some details, and we'll never know what these details are.
I'd tell you what some of the details are that I just came across before we started talking today, since yesterday when we talked last. That is that Ukraine must stand down the mobilization of its army.
Yeah.
That they must stop producing weapons, all kinds of things which are ridiculous.
Well, exactly.
They're going to fly.
Well,
that's why I don't think it's going to work.
So it's not going to work. But I mean, I think probably Putin is finding it very difficult to know what to do next, in all honesty. Because if he agrees to peace or a peace deal, he then risks the nutters back home who will say he's betrayed Mother Russia. If he doesn't agree to a peace deal or even a ceasefire, then he's likely to incur the wrath of Donald Trump, whatever that means. But it will then just become a longer war of attrition.
Okay, you were also NATO correspondent, Nicholas. I'm going to ask you about that. You reported on NATO for several years too, then the Middle East. And that was a weekly or bi-monthly thing.
Weekly.
Quite a decent sized segment, on the TV there, in English, of course. What do you think is NATO's response? I need to talk to our friend Anthony McFarland Gonzalez, who, of course, is a cybersecurity expert with NATO.
Well,
I'm going to get him and talk to him this week. But what do you think is NATO's move right now?
Well, NATO's move right now is rather confused because, of course, the United States is the major part of NATO, and nobody's quite sure what the United States' attitude to all this is, other than what's been happening with Saudi Arabia and the talks between this original or this tentative peace deal. In terms of Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister's coalition of the willing, they had another large 29-nation conference call, I think, yesterday or Friday. The upshot was they were going to send, when peace finally breaks out, they'll send a peacekeeping force of 10,000 soldiers, which is obviously inadequate, and 2 minesweepers, which are ex-Royal Navy minesweepers, which were given to the Ukrainian Navy, but they're nowhere near Ukraine because since the outbreak of hostilities, as is their right and has been their right for donkey's years, Turkey has closed the Bosphorus to warships, which it always does in a time of conflict. But the point is, it's all right running these people running around, but they're making promises to send soldiers they haven't got to a frontier they can't defend, and it may make them all feel better, but it's of very little practical use to anybody. And if I can see that, and you can see that, I'm sure the Russians can see it. The problem is the European Union members of NATO and the European members of NATO have allowed both their armed forces, but even more importantly, their arms manufacturing capability to decline to such a large extent over the last couple of decades that it will take them years and years and years to be able to make a meaningful contribution. So that they should start now, but as you can see, they're still a bit slow at getting started. And that is part of, on paper, NATO has lots of people available, lots of soldiers and sailors and airmen and airwomen, etc., available on paper. But in reality, it is slightly different. People are finally beginning to wake up. But you still, I still don't detect any, when you read what people are up to, I still don't detect any sense of urgency. The new German chancellor is seeking to reverse decades of German fiscal conservatism by creating these two large funds, which would allow a rather greater federal borrowing with a view to being able to spend more on defense. But you can't, modern defense is very complicated. It takes years to build up resources. And that is part of the problem now. The country should never have allowed their defense. And to be fair to successive American presidents and military leaders, they've been urging Europe for decades to take defense more seriously. But everybody thought, oh, well, the world is very safe. And then after 1989, that was it, we've won. And then under Angela Merkel, we can do lots of good deals with the Russians, and the Russians will be so keen to sell us oil and gas, there won't be any trouble to us. And unfortunately, that has not turned out to be the case. And so now everybody's in a bit of a pickle.
Yeah, I mean, Merkel was not the right leader. She made a lot of the same mistakes Biden's people made, which riled the German people. Preferring foreign immigrants to their own people is not a winning policy. Which brings me to: are you aware that, and this is headlined from a left wing or let's say not conservative website, 68% of people disapprove of the Democratic Party. That's all voters. 68%. This includes Republicans and Democrats. Of Democrats, only 21% disapprove. 40% approve of Democrats. 49% of Democrats, which is really bizarre, disapprove of their party. So that shows a shift to the center, strong shift to the center, and yet they're looking for their leadership from the left still.
Well, this is the problem.
People like Cortez.
Yeah. Oh, well, that would be a disaster, wouldn't it? I mean, that just makes a bad situation worse.
I don't think
Cortez,
she's worse than Tulsi Gabbard on understanding international policy.
Cortez and that group of three or four Congress women, one of which who is an extreme Islamicist, who seems to think when the cameras are not on her, quite happy to stand up at rallies and meetings of Muslims and say that America is and should be an Islamic state. These people are extremely dangerous. But you're right, this move to the center, I mean, I don't see it as a move to the center. I don't think it's the politicians of either side who've abandoned the center. The people, both in the United States and the United Kingdom, have always been broadly centrist.
People are, exactly. Well, but let's describe what that centrism encompasses, because I completely agree.
Yeah. Well, I think there's it means
they're moderate. People are moderate.
It means sensible economic policies. It means things working properly. It means not allowing minorities to take the mickey. Essentially, it means no to mass immigration, which is really something the politicians have been too scared to put to the vote because they know the people will reject it. This is not just in the United States or the United Kingdom, across the European Union. Everybody is getting fed up of this.
Yeah, well, the thing is that people forget when they're supporting this mass immigration is, I mean, the argument from the left is, boy, this is interesting too, because it's not the capitalists who are saying we need illegal immigrants. It's the left-wing socialists that are saying, they're particularly pushing the idea. Okay, we have a mixed economy. All of us are socialists to a certain extent because of the government programs that we have voted in, and we voted in politicians who created them over for almost 100 years, certainly since the 1930s in the West. But we're penalizing the mass of people who want to immigrate through the proper channels and rewarding people who don't do it.
And it's
with all kinds of things, talk about if you apply in the United States for citizenship, even if you're married to someone, you have to show that you're not going to be a ward of the state, right? Which the state's not going to. You have to show an income. The state's not going to take care of you. But yet, all this huge mass of immigration that came in were people just pouring over the border with no checks or at all, including during COVID, when they weren't even checked for the virus, when everybody else was. This dichotomy is one of the reasons that people want, maybe the chief reason, because people see it in their everyday lives, the unfairness of it, is why people are against the Democrats, because it's a lack of common sense.
But it is. I mean, the first thing Keir Starmer's government did in the United Kingdom was the much derided Rwanda scheme, which was beginning to have an effect even before it became operational. And this was proven by the large numbers of migrants who suddenly turned up in Dublin, having got themselves to Northern Ireland and crossed the border, because they were worried if they stayed within the United Kingdom, they would somehow be sent to Rwanda. Keir Starmer, of course, they said this was terrible, so they came and they abandoned it straight away. Interesting to note that the Italians are wanting to do something similar in Albania. The Germans are looking at a similar scheme somewhere else. The Dutch of all people, are in discussions for a similar scheme with Uganda. The Australians.
Well, the Dutch are not the Danes. They're not Scandinavians. They're much more. And actually, Scandinavians are much more underneath the surface. I mean, they're Vikings. They really don't like other people.
Well, Denmark has sort of closed its borders as best it can, and Sweden is essentially saying no more asylum people, because
and they're getting rid of people who are troublemakers too.
Well, we should get rid of people who are troublemakers. What people forget is there are many people who have come legally as immigrants over the last few years, or indeed over a longer period, who are themselves distressed by what is happening, because it A, makes their life more difficult, B, they get tarred with the same brush every time
they're
something goes wrong.
Nicholas,
exactly.
You're absolutely right. It's a stigma.
People think of immigrants, they think all these great guys and women who run the corner shop, who do all these useful jobs, particularly in the case of from many years ago, the Ugandan Asians who came to the United Kingdom and become very prominent business people. That's what people think of immigrants. But what we've been getting in recent years, very few have fallen into that category.
Well, you get tons of people coming across, don't you, Nicholas? And just to agree with you, tons of people coming across the border don't even speak English, or even make a rudimentary effort at speaking English. And why are they here?
Well, because
why are they in Europe? Why are they in the United States? Why?
Because we're a soft touch. I mean, there's a particular problem with the United Kingdom, is that English is such a common language that many of them have family, or they think if they get to England, they'll be able to be absorbed into the job market more easily because they speak English. And because of our history, we don't have the same checks and identity checks which they have in continental Europe. It's very easy for Poland to keep people out, or if they get here, for them not to be able to do anything. Because as you know, in Poland, you need a piece of paper with your name and number on to actually do anything. That's not the case. And this is something which the French have made this point particularly about the United Kingdom. Please change your administration so at the pull, you're not sucking in all these immigrants who are traveling across the continent of Europe to get to the United Kingdom. But and it's just so obvious, it beggars belief that last year the United Kingdom legally allowed 960,000 people into the country. That's about 1.6% of the population. So we're getting poorer, because if the population grows by 1.6%, but the economy grew by 0.5%, by definition, on a GDP per capita basis, we're poorer than we were the year before.
And how many of those people are productive in terms of working and creating and paying taxes and the rest of it? How many of them are indeed wards of the state? The left doesn't seem to think that's a problem, because that's going to be their voters. Let's be frank about it. Right? In the United States, they need agricultural workers. Okay, that's the big argument from the left, and that sometimes Republicans, or somewhat traditionally, I believe, based on research and reading and listening, have considered, they turn a blind eye to it to some extent, but not 10 million, 12 million people in a matter of what, a decade? I mean, less than a decade, probably. Who knows how many people there are? If you just, what kind of mindset opens the border gates to a flood of people you don't know who they are, and then you reward them with entitlements, allow them to seek refugee status? What kind of country does that, and then makes it hard for people to do it legitimately?
Yeah, well, it reaches states of absurdity. There's the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom saying, "Yippee, we're going to spend £6 billion more on defence," which is a good thing. It should be £60 billion more, but I take no point on that. Isn't that wonderful? But he actually claimed it's 13 billion. It's 6 billion. At the same time, he is spending, or the government is spending, £8 billion a year on temporary accommodation for folk who arrive by rubber dinghy, who shouldn't, across the channel, who shouldn't be there in the first place. Where we do not, unfortunately, after years of this nonsense, the country is slowly going bankrupt. And people say it's all Brexit. It's not Brexit. This is complete stupidity.
Yeah, well, this just came on the heels of Brexit, or in the midst of Brexit. So it looks like it might be Brexit. I mean, Brexit has its pros and cons, but when you throw in, as you say, that this amount of people into
and then we have another problem. We have 9 million people of working age who are inactive economically. 9 million.
Out of a population, what's your population?
They reckon by the end of the decade, the sickness benefit, which is in addition to the other benefits, will be £100 billion a year, twice the defence budget. This benefit did not exist 10 years ago.
What's the GDP of Britain?
Is it something like $2.5 trillion, something like that? 2.5 trillion.
That sounds about right. I don't know immediately, but that sounds about right.
And the government is spending about $1 trillion, and everybody gets very excited over saving $6 billion.
Yeah, what's the remedy though?
The remedy, like all remedies, is going to be very painful, but we've reached that point.
That's the way it looks, doesn't it?
What we need is it's going to be the same shock to the system, if anybody's prepared to do that Mrs. Thatcher brought when she was Prime Minister at the beginning, which was terrible, a terrible destruction. In many ways, she went too far with industry, but it's that sort of shock we need. We've got to get people working who are here. We've got to stop taking more people who need to take out more than they can put in. Otherwise, everybody is going to be poor. Well, they are going to be poorer. I mean, these are the facts.
But let's be clear. We're not anti-immigration. The declining population in the West, in the United States, in Europe and the United States, we need people to come in.
Well, we need the right sort of people. We don't need people full stop.
And they have to go through the process. You can't just throw a bunch of people with no connection to the countries they're going to into the mix, or they create ghettos and diasporas that become antithetical to the countries in which they live.
That's exactly the point. That's exactly what you get branded as being a racist for saying. Common sense.
But you wouldn't get branded as being a racist if you said, if people were invading Rwanda or Kenya or India or Pakistan.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right. It's okay for the Africans to throw out Whitey because he's a terrible person. But it's not okay for Whitey in his country to say, hang on a minute, I think we have too many people. Can we can we have a common sense approach?
Stop calling me Whitey.
You know what I mean? I'm using dramatic language to emphasize the point.
All right, well, let's move on from that. I think we've exhausted that for now, and it's all food for thought. And some people are going to disagree violently with what we're saying for some unknown reason. But others will say, as Gavin Newsom is beginning to say, the very ultra liberal governor of California, he's sprinting to the center ahead of a presidential run. So he's now meeting us in the center.
Well, the center is
we're in the center. Yeah. You know, we're moderates, centrists. You know, All our lives, we've been probably there. I have. Either a little to the left when I was younger and a little to the right of the center as I got older. But certainly now on the conservative side, but perhaps that comes with age. And losing some, adopting practicality and losing some of the utopianism of youth, which is a necessary part of that. Utopianism is perhaps a necessary part of coming of age. At any rate, one must come of age. Now, I got a few stories here which are going to blow your mind.
Okay.
People, the egg price. Have you heard about the egg price in the United States?
I haven't. Yeah, I've heard a lot. There's been a lot. It seems to me there's been a lot coming from the United States about the price of eggs. This is becoming a political feature.
Can I tell you a little bit about it?
Please do.
Like
yeah.
A little bit about it? Okay. I have the facts right in front of me, but no eggs. Unfortunately, they're too expensive. In 2019, pre the pandemic, it was $1.50 for a dozen eggs in the United States, which is, I don't know what it is in Poland. It's about $2, $2.50 in Poland, but Europe's always more expensive. That's what it is now. Okay, in Poland and in Central Europe, generally cheaper in the countryside. In 2024, it was $3, so double. A year later, it's almost $6. And people are smuggling eggs from Mexico. There's a real thing on the border. No, seriously. There's smuggling eggs from Mexico, and there's a sort of special a lookout for egg smugglers, which is the most hilarious thing. I never thought I'd see that. But so many things we never thought we'd see.
Unfortunately, yes.
And this is just incredible. I heard some of it had to do with avian flu, but I think it's just inflation and the cost of fuel, transport, feed, taking care of the chickens, feeding them and lighting and warming the places where they live and all that sort of thing. So it's about energy, mostly, one would think, and some avian flu perhaps. But that's a true thing. On the border, they are looking not just for drug smugglers, but for egg smugglers.
That's incredible.
Something I never thought I'd live to see. It never occurred to me to smuggle eggs, but I tell you what, if I go to Mexico, I'm going to see how many eggs I can get back in, because I believe in, being part Scottish, I believe in economy and frugality. Now, which part is the question? What about if you're aware of Doge, right? And Musk,
yeah,
as the whole world seems to be, as they attack the bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is not democracy, my phrase, if I may.
You may.
And under that motto, perhaps, we could say that they're attacking the bureaucracy in the United States and trying to reduce it so we can get the debt down and balance the budget. The last time it was balanced was under a Democrat. Full credit to Bill Clinton for balancing the budget. He had a Republican Congress, and they worked very hard on doing that back 30 years ago. All right. So 60%, though, of Americans are disapproving of the way Musk is doing his job, according to the poll I saw. I mean, it may be a left of center poll, but let's just say even if it's 50%, a lot of people are unhappy, and it doesn't dovetail exactly with because we talked about how many people are disappointed. Democrats are disappointed in their own party, so it's not just Democrats. It's Republicans and Democrats who are disapproving of this. 120 years ago, we had the robber barons in the United States. That was the name for them. The huge, I mean, they weren't billionaires. They were just world owners. The Carnegies, the Rockefellers, the Mellons, the Goodyear, all of these families. Pulitzer, who controlled the press, a lot of the press, and in the United States, along with people like Hearst, who was famously, William Randolph Hearst, famously very conservative. These people were attacked. I'm leading to something about Upton Sinclair, the writer. These people were finally corralled by Teddy Roosevelt. A lot of people look back to that time now, looking at the vast wealth, even, commensurate wealth, I should say J.P. Morgan as well, who controlled finance, who actually financed, put together the package for the British so they could run their society their empire during World War I. These people were attacked by Teddy Roosevelt and introduced the antitrust acts, which broke up, for example, Rockefeller's empire of oil, broke up Standard Oil, and in order to allow competition. Anyway, Teddy Roosevelt, a rich man himself, from the very highest elite of the East Coast, Northeast Coast, took a common sense approach and wanted to limit, and did limit, in fact, the power of these people. But another thing he did is very, very important, which was protecting workers. He was first reluctant to get involved, but then Upton Sinclair wrote a book called The Jungle about the meatpacking industry in Chicago. Upton Sinclair went to Chicago and worked undercover in a meatpacking plant and saw up close, day by day, what was going on. And there was, horrific things were going on, not just the working conditions and the harm to the workers from loss of limbs, from the machines, from problems with the chemicals that were being used in the meat packing, particularly in the meat packing process, but in other things as well. Sinclair wrote this serialized articles in a left-wing socialist publication of the time, because this was a time of great socialism, not only in the United States, but in the UK, of course, the Fabian Society, and the leaders of the Webbs and Bernard Shaw, who were trying to make a more palatable, create a more palatable version of Marxism, which was seen as way too radical to be to succeed in those countries. But also there were workers' rights that needed to be examined. These people were living and working in horrific conditions. So, just to say the least. Now, this change that was created, this desire for change with Teddy Roosevelt, created the Pure Food and Drug Act, which regulated the production of drugs. It took cocaine and heroin out of the medicaments you could buy in the local drugstore, and regulated those substances. You can say that in some ways it set the groundwork for the abolition of alcohol in 1918 or 1919, just after the First World War, lasted until 1932, the Prohibition time. But and then regulated all these industries that were slaughtering animals, for example, and then packing the meat. I mean, they would pack spoiled meat, disguised that it was spoiled. I mean, horrific things were going on. Put it in your hot dogs, So that was an example of regulation on the ultra rich, which was needed at the time, right? And is it too far to say we need the same thing today? I think not.
No, I think.
What say you?
I think we certainly do.
Yeah, and why?
Well, because we have now an imbalance. There are a small number of people, largely American tech billionaires, who have far too much power over most people's daily lives. And
Yeah,
we saw, and we saw, and we saw during COVID how this power was abused, essentially. But it's now commonly admitted by everybody that this outbreak happened from an outbreak from a Chinese laboratory in Wuhan, as a lot of people said at the time. But
we
those
weren't
that
allowed to say that, but we said it
but
on
at the
our
time,
show,
people
didn't
weren't
we?
allowed to say it. Some they were banned by Facebook and people. Some people probably lost their jobs over this.
A lot of
But
people
now,
did.
where's the apology when they were actually merely telling the truth? Where was the debate? Where the free speech, a different point of view?
This is one of
Uh,
the reasons the Democrats were voted out. And it's one of the reasons also that people were disappointed to some extent with the choice that was offered in the last election on both sides, because some of this started under Trump, but really the draconian stuff started, as we well remember, under the new Biden administration.
I mean, and
After the vaccine came in.
the trouble is, although many of these people, these businesses, have become monopolies. And we know that Teddy Roosevelt saw the disadvantage of monopoly. I mean, take Microsoft.
Well, it's all obvious.
We are having this conversation on Skype in May, which Microsoft bought. In May, Skype is going to be closed down. You may migrate to a free version of Teams, also run by Microsoft, but it's not as user friendly. The free version has considerable limitations compared to the paid version, of course. Skype is simple. You just go online and you press a button and you can call whoever you want to call. You can't do that with Teams. You've got to sort of set up a meeting, you've got to send an email or whatever. Within your organization, maybe you can do it slightly differently, but you don't necessarily have a large organization if you and I are not part of the same organization for these purposes. So that's a classic example of a monopoly player actually becoming even more entrenched. Now, Bill Gates may be a wonderful person. This is not a personal attack on Bill Gates.
He's not there anymore. It's Cook.
But the point is, and what is even more insidious,
no, it's not Cook.
is a lot of these companies are then providing their services to governments, and they are running government services as well. And then you are forced to use them. You are forced, in many cases, if you wish to communicate with your bank, if you wish to communicate increasingly with governments, you're forced to have a smart telephone, and you're forced, therefore, to use whatever programs these are, often provided by the same people. Facebook is another example. They take your data and they sell it and they make money out of you. And there's very little control you have over how they use that data. And you don't know how secure it is ultimately. You don't know. And of course, governments can see this, and they want to be in on it as well. They want this untrammeled power. They see what the Chinese are doing, and they'd like to do it themselves. Hence this, I mean, in the United Kingdom, a country where they should know better, hence legislation now which is trying to force Apple to give up the encryption of certain services, so that allegedly the police or whatever can track down paedophiles. The reality is the police and others have plenty of powers which they fail to use already, but they always want more power. And the only people who ever suffer from these abuses of power are normal people going about their daily lives, because they're the targets. And the whole thing is just getting far too powerful. So we need to break up. We need to have a Teddy Roosevelt type approach. It's not hostility to capitalism. It's not hostility to the people running these businesses. It is just unhealthy. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Whether you're a president, a prime minister, or the chief executive or major shareholder of a company for which a large part of the world's a large part of the world's population is either dependent or forced to use you. You and I might like to use Skype, but Skype was bought by Microsoft, and we are now forced to use Microsoft.
Well, do we need someone walking behind these people, these billionaires, behind the president as well? He's a billionaire, whispering in their ear, "You are just a man." I
think we do. I mean, it cannot be it is simply not healthy that any individuals have so much power. unless they are particularly focused on not abusing that power. I mean, you know, you might take it, if you look at the current crop of American billionaires, the one who probably is not abusing his power, not even in the economic sense, is Warren Buffett at Berkshire Hathaway, because that's purely an investment company, and they're just very successful at buying other people's businesses. But he's not trying to create a monopoly, as far as I'm aware. He and the late Charlie Munger were very good at spotting businesses which could make a good return for shareholders. That's a slightly different approach. But you know, Microsoft or these others, don't deny they make good stuff and we all use it. But it's this: there was no need for Microsoft to buy Skype, for example, and then close it down. I mean, that just shows what their mentality.
Yeah, I agree. They didn't ask anybody if they liked Skype. You know, we've been using Skype forever. They did a similar thing. They've often done these weird things like forcing change on you with Word. I mean, when you're already happy, changing the way your email works without notice or with very brief notice. It's as if, you know, look, you have no choice, so we're going to tell you what to do, which is wrong on the face of it. The head of Microsoft actually is Satya Nadella. I had to look that up because I knew.
Okay.
I don't know what I said. I said Cook, but he's the head of Apple.
He's the head of Apple, yeah.
Yeah. So it's Satya Nadella, and the head of Microsoft AI is Mustafa Suleyman. Interesting. The I didn't remember that. You know, but it pays to, you know, this is business stuff. It's a whole nother world that you have to follow to keep up with it. And you need to follow it on a daily basis to keep up with what's happening with stocks.
But I mean, the point is the AI services are used by government. And at what point is government, if it's dependent on Microsoft AI for a lot of its government services, at what point is government then able to turn around to Microsoft and say, oh, by the way, we think certain things are not working in the public interest? And they'll say, hey, we're going to turn off your computers. Well, you know, when this is an argument which Trump made when it came to using the Chinese software. We couldn't use Chinese software for our 5G system because that was likely to be controlled by the Chinese government, which is obviously not a good idea. But ultimately, if it's about the abuse of power or the potential abuse of power, a US tech billionaire, we assume he's been brought up and is a subscriber to the US view of democracy, etc., and is a thoroughly good egg. And therefore,
you have to assume that. But the problem is, power corrupts, right?
Power corrupts, and we can't assume that any longer.
It's the old axiom that you brought up. I mean, it's almost a cliche at this point. I mean, everybody's heard it. And when you look at what is happening today, and particularly with AI, it seems as if, what if power in AI develops its own? If power does corrupt and absolute power, what happens when AI gets absolute power and you can't shut it off, like in 2001, which was made in 1968 or 67, the late 60s, and Arthur C. Clarke wrote about the computer HAL, and saw, and that's obviously an AI type of invention, that computer, and saw that it could develop a mind of its own. That's a long time ago. It's rather like the H.G. Wells stuff, looking
exactly
into the future. So this is something that we're facing a lot of HALs, you know, in our own homes, perhaps. And you say, if the corporations do control AI, which means they can take over your computer if they want, can't they?
Well, indeed. Well, they can, and they probably do.
Yeah.
Yeah, or your telephone, or all these sorts of things.
Oh, the telephone is obvious. I mean, there's no security on a telephone whatsoever. If anybody has your number, there's no security.
No, and but the point is, in many cases, you cannot increasingly access even normal daily services without a smartphone. I was trying to do something on a UK government website, but I had to download account. I had to have a smartphone to do this.
Yeah, and they want you to go paperless, which I think is just an excuse for more control. I mean, it's likely, oh no, paperless, it's good for the economy, but no, we grow a lot of trees. I mean, trees are harvested by the big companies like United Paper.
But it's not that good because if you think of the amount of energy now which these servers require to keep cool, they're using huge amounts of energy.
Right.
And if you're talking about sustainability, I think chopping down a tree, turning it into paper, recycling your paper is probably more sustainable.
Paper is ultimately recyclable because even if it goes into as trash, it disintegrates rapidly.
Well, essentially, I mean, no doubt the economists or the biologists will tell us we're completely wrong, but I mean, time scale apart, it actually, we have a huge problem with energy.
Tell us we're completely wrong, for sure.
Yeah, but I mean, no, what we need, of course, is and the secret of any economic development in the history of mankind has been energy, and the leap forward in the Industrial Revolution, for example, in the early part of our human existence, you had to gather firewood, and they used gathered firewood and you burned a fire. But the energy you got from burning the firewood was actually not dissimilar from the energy you had to expend to collect the firewood. The great leap forward came with the Industrial Revolution, when the energy you got from coal was far greater than the energy required to mine the coal. I mean, this is a great leap forward. And similarly with nuclear power. And what we need is, that's why we should move to nuclear power, in fact, because without the reason our economies are stagnating is we're reaching this point where we haven't got enough energy to get things done properly. So we can't make these leaps forward in the same way we used to be able to. It's a very good
point, eloquently put. Really nice point.
I do try.
Pretty good. Have you done this before? Every night, I think, during the week. But no, one other thing before we go, because we've run almost an hour and 10 minutes. Hot coffee. Do you remember the story of the McDonald's coffee back in the late 90s?
Oh, yes.
Something around there. A lady had hot coffee spent on her, and she got, a couple $1 million or whatever it was from McDonald's, a lot of money, because of hot coffee. A fellow was in a Starbucks and ordered some coffee, and they put it in one of those takeaway trays, right? And apparently the lid on one of them was not securely put down, which I should be suing a lot of coffee people because it's happened to me a bunch of times. But apparently he spilled it into his lap and burned his genitalia through his, I don't know if he was naked or he had on very thin trousers, but that was some pretty hot coffee, wasn't it? Anyway, he's been awarded $50 million by a jury.
Yeah, but presumably that'll be reduced on appeal because that's just crazy.
It is crazy, but it makes me think about buying a lot of coffee in Starbucks and spilling it on myself inadvertently, or trying to take the tray and then suing Starbucks. What do you think? I shouldn't have said that because it's an evil.
Well, I think I
should have said it live on.
No, but I think a lot of these cases are from an English legal point of view and are just nonsense. If you buy a hot coffee, then you have to be careful. And if I spill the coffee, I can't blame
it.
I don't want to buy a cold coffee, do I? I wouldn't be into a coffee shop to buy a cold coffee. I mean, what temperature do people think they're getting their coffee for? And if I spill it, that's my fault.
I have spilled Starbucks coffee and McDonald's coffee on myself. And I can tell you, it smarted a little bit, but didn't burn me through my clothes. I mean, that coffee would almost have to be on fire, wouldn't it?
Well, I'd have thought so. I think what
temperature does liquid
burn? But I think in the United States you have a different mentality. The United States takes you that everything in life that is unfortunate in your life is the fault of somebody else who can be sued when you can find a lawyer to do it, and you have a system of contingency fees or fees where you only pay your lawyer if you win and he takes 40% or she takes 40%, and you have a much lower social security system, much lower social security funds available to help people get over the wrongs in life. So you've gone a slightly different way from continental Europe, it seems to me. But whenever I read of these cases in the newspapers, I'm always just appalled at the sheer disproportion of the financial compensation which is given to somebody for what appears to be a minor accident.
And, I mean, I agree with you. I agree with you, but I am going to Google the nearest Starbucks and go over there immediately.
Yes, well,
the thunderstorm is finished. Well, I think it has. So maybe I'll cycle over there and, sort of trip while they're handing it to me.
Yeah, well, you could try. Yeah, I mean, I just find it, just remarkable. And
you're not going to do that? You're not going to try it out?
No, I'm not going to do that.
No,
I'm not.
All right. Do you think I should?
No, you're an American.
I'm a free agent.
You're an American in the United States. That's kind of the way you folk do this sort of stuff.
That's true. I mean, I wouldn't be American if I didn't at least try it.
Well, that's exactly the point, isn't it?
Although I do feel a lot of sympathy for the fellow, who burned his privates.
Well, yeah, but
coffee.
Yeah, but he spilt the coffee. It wasn't the Starbucks people had spilled.
I know, that's the hazy part. It seems as if the Starbucks employee may have aided the spillage. At the moment of taking it, the lid was slightly off, and then it tilted. You see, this has all been worked out. We'd have to read the transcript, wouldn't we? To get the full detail.
But $50 million.
I think it's a movie of the week myself.
Yeah, but $50 million is just wasting everybody's time, isn't it? It's just completely ridiculous.
I know. Maybe he gets. If you gave him a couple $100, that'd be about right.
Well, yeah, or you offered to buy him a new pair of shorts or trousers or whatever it was wearing.
Make him a lifetime member of Starbucks.
Yeah, the whole thing is just completely disproportionate.
Anyway, you want to add anything? Is there anything you want to talk about?
No, I think we're now left with this enduring image of genitalia damaged by Starbucks coffee.
Yeah, I mean, I find it disturbing, but we live in a disturbing world, and we're going to have to live with it.
Yeah, and who knows what this next week will bring, because it seems that the world changes very rapidly.
Yeah, I think by the time we talk next week, half of what we said could be totally redundant. Anyway, that doesn't seem to bother anyone else, so why should it bother us? Indeed. I'm Will Richardson here. He's Nicholas Richardson
there.
We'll see you next time.
Okay, great.
Cheers, Nicholas.
Bye. Bye.